Did you know you can now register for the 7th annual OSMOSIS Con taking place October 10th to the 12th, 2021 at the Bahia Resort Hotel, San Diego? We have exciting news. You'll now be able to attend this renowned event in person in San Diego or virtually through a dynamic online community. Cynthia Hetherington and the HG Group consistently deliver the best training at this open source intelligence skills building conference, and this year is no exception. You can learn more at osmosiscon.com.
I want to talk to everybody today about ScopeNow.com. ScopeNow has been a big-time sponsor of this program for quite some time, and I just love their service. I've been using them since the beginning. I'm one of their beta customers, and it's been so awesome to see them grow into the business that they are today, and just how they just keep reinventing themselves and pushing themselves to get more and more information. What it comes down to is ScopeNow is a tool that you definitely need to use if you do social media investigations, any internet research, and really spending less time digging around and looking for information. I think is one of the best points of how ScopeNow can help you. Their AI platform, their analytics are amazing. You really get an idea of what you need. You're reducing the time, you're reducing the manpower that you're spending on doing this research, because they're essentially doing it for you, and they're doing it correctly, which is most important. One of the new things that they're actually offering is this flagging system where you can flag behaviors and really highlight and look out for fraud. If you're doing a lot of fraud research, this is a fantastic tool, and you can set up alerts. So you have particular people that you're looking at, you can actually set up alerts to get notifications when the criteria that you set up is actually is flagged and goes off. It's really, really amazing. And their relationship and association analytics are top notch, really cutting edge and really, really cool. When they brought that out on version 3, it was a game changer. I mean, really being able to see how people interact together and having that relationship, analysis is really, really something that's cool. One of the other things about being involved with ScopeNow is their ability to offer webinars. Their team is cutting edge on putting together and getting out really, really great content. If you're a member of ScopeNow, if you know who they are, you've seen them around on LinkedIn, you'll know that they're constantly doing webinars on these new websites that are coming out, and they're really staying on top of it. And don't forget, any reports that you generate, you can actually white label those reports and put your own logos on and really make them look professional, which could equate to more billing for you as well. So check them out today. It's www.scopenow.com. They're a great, great company. They should be one of the tools in your toolbox, along with whatever kind of search engines you do. You need to make sure that ScopeNow is a part of that suite. Scopenow.com.
Are you an investigative professional? Have you heard about the investigatorstoolbox.com? Check out this exclusive online community for networking, learning, and data resource management. The Toolbox is a one-stop shop for all your investigative needs. Check out our robust collection of forums, our comprehensive learning page, and our expansive library of OSINT research tools. We've just released an app for both iOS and Android, so you can access the site seamlessly right off your phone. We have also partnered with some amazing companies like Crosstracks, Delphpoint, IRB, ScopeNow, the Hetherington Group, PI Magazine, PI Gear, Merlin Locate Services, Parabin, the PI Institute of Education, and so many more. They're offering over $1,250 worth of discounts and benefits exclusively to community members today. Use code PIP201836 and save 10% on your membership. That's www.investigators-toolbox.com.
Welcome to OSMOSIS Quick Hits on PI Perspectives. We're going to take the next few weeks to highlight some of the speakers at the 2021 conference in San Diego, California. This week, we welcome keynote speaker Fred Burton. Fred has had an amazing career and got in at the ground floor with combating terrorism. His topic is the evolution of protective intelligence. You're going to love this episode. So let's welcome Fred Burton and your host, private investigator Matt Spaier.
And welcome everybody to this week's edition of Quick Hits PI Perspective. This is Matt Spaier, your host. We are focusing in on the OSMOSIS conference that's coming up in October in San Diego. We are really fortunate today to have our keynote speaker here, Fred Burton. Fred, I want to welcome you to the program. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Matt. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah. I think we spent probably about 30 minutes close to just chatting before we actually turned the cameras on. And I'm like, I should probably turn the cameras on. Wow, what a career you've had. Tell folks a little bit about your background and how you got into this business.
Oh, wow. Well, it was a long time ago, but seems like yesterday at times, Matt. I started out as a volunteer for my local rescue squad when I was 17. I actually spent more time doing that than I did going to high school. And it really kind of set the bug for me to do something in public safety or public service. So right. We had a lot of our colleagues there that either went to the fire EMS service or the police service. So I started out in the police service, and then out in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is a little, not so little anymore, but a suburb of Washington, D.C.
Sure.
And I eventually made my way to the federal service, where I was a special agent with the State Department. And I was actually one of the first 3 counterterrorism agents that the State Department had.
Wow.
So, yeah, looking back on my career in that time period, Matt, I went from being a patrol cop taking burglary reports,
right, to
investigating international acts of terror. And it was overwhelming. Yeah. And I was
that being like the right place at the right time, or you just really had a knack for this stuff?
Oh, I'm not so sure I had a knack for this stuff, Matt. How many of us in this line of work actually feel we ever have a knack for anything until we kind of get into the groove? But I was just randomly assigned from special agent training into our 3-man counterterrorism unit at the time.
Okay.
And ended up staying there for almost 15 years. And I worked on all of the embassy bombings, throughout the 80s and the 90s, several hijackings, political assassinations, plane crashes,
right,
and attacks on diplomats around the globe.
Yeah. I did a really interesting interview last year with a guy named Jim Ryan, who was involved in the Lockerbie bombing with the FBI doing the investigations, and the recovery of like a small, insignificant, they thought at the time, piece of evidence. They held on to it for such a long time before they realized, like, oh, this is the smoking gun. It was really fascinating. What kind of changes have you seen in the time that you've been doing all this work? Obviously, technology has gotten better, but what are some of the other things as far as like methodology or just things that you've noticed while doing this type of work over the years?
Well, Matt, remember when I started in the business in the 80s, the early 80s, in essence, our database was 3x5 index cards. Mm-hmm. We had no cell phones. We literally did not have the internet. We had eventually a standalone computer in our group, which nobody really knew how to work. So we spent most of our time typing reports, literally on IBM Selectric typewriters. Wow. And it was just a different era. And so as you look at the transition of the industry, it's night and day. When I teach or I give talks and I get people that come up to me, hey, I want to do what you did, I say, you really can't, because it was a different era and a different generation.
Right.
And certainly, on the lead up towards the first World Trade Center bombing, which I was involved with, and, I've gotten way too much credit than I deserve, for example, for the capture of Ramzi Youssef, the mastermind of the first World Trade Center bombing. That was a tremendous team effort. But, the world changed slowly. After the first World Trade Center bombing, we got a little bit better on intelligence sharing, not much, but a little bit better.
Sure.
We still had the walls up between the FBI, the CIA, and the intelligence community problems. There wasn't a lot of sharing with the local police or state police in any capacity. And then, of course, the events of 9/11 with the strategic strike by Al Qaeda in New York, which, changed the world. So it really made terrorism a national priority, which up until that point in time, it wasn't. So, some of the innovations that you see are software, various investigative databases to help you make sense of the needles in the haystack, software platforms to help you manage investigations. These are the kinds of things that never existed early on in my career.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. I remember when I was in college, John Jay College, like I'm in the city, and
great school.
Yeah. It's the value of my degree keeps going up because the school's much better than when I was actually there. So that's pretty cool. But one of the classes I had was a class on terrorism, and the bombings, the first bombings actually happened while I was there, while I was in school. I think it was in my second year or first year even. So it started to change everything. But I remember taking that terrorism class and studying about the BCCI scandal, the banks, right? And how money was laundered. And that was like the new thing of funding these terrorism, and reading these books and just seeing the horror of how it's right on your back door. It's here, but you don't realize it's here as far as the funding goes and the money. And now all bets are off. I mean, you've got cryptocurrency, you've got different ways for all this stuff to happen. I can only imagine, how you go about these days trying to put all this stuff together. And it's a real Wild West, right?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking back to sitting in our 3-man office, and we had no ability to follow the money in any capacity. You certainly had organizations like U.S. Treasury FinCEN and the agency of the CIA did have a little bit of visibility at times. Surprisingly, DEA in those days were doing a good job, I think, of following the money as it pertains to narcotics in places out of like Southeast Asia and so forth. And
right. Yep.
But the narcotics problem is that kind of issue too that nobody really pays a lot of attention to, and DEA was just kind of off on their own, running their own show at times. So, but you're right. The sophistication today, and one of the things that we learned, which we really struggled with, was before the fall or the collapse of the Soviet Union. We really didn't have a lot of visibility into the degree of nation state sponsors of terror. So, once the wall fell and once we started getting access to some of the old KGB and Stasi files,
right,
then we were able to piece together that, hell, the Russians at the time, before the wall fell, they were supporting and funding a tremendous number of terrorist organizations, to include those that had been operating inside the United States, like the Weather Underground and the Black Panther Party. And we also had the Libyans with Gaddafi that was funding, the likes of Carlos the Jackal and the Italian Red Brigades and the Red Army faction and the Japanese Red Army. And the list just went on and on and on.
Right. And hey, listen, I mean, it's still going on these days, and now allegedly elections and things of that nature. It's gone but not forgotten, right? It's just it's so amazing, right?
Yeah, the one thing you learn in this business, or I learned the hard way, is there really isn't any friendly intelligence services. And when you looked at the Russians during that time period, and it very much still exists today, a destabilized America is good for Russia.
Yeah,
and good for China.
Exactly.
So as chaos as we can have, and as much kerosene as they can throw onto that fire domestically, for us, that just benefits Russia and China and our nation state adversaries, to include Iran.
Yep. I mean, that's how you knock superpowers down, right? You just create confusion internally, and we're too busy, trying to figure out, what to do with Facebook, and they're doing whatever they're doing on their end. So yeah, it's pretty crazy, man. So the evolution of protective intelligence is the title of what you're going to be speaking about. So tell me a little bit about what you plan to discuss during your keynote.
Well, first off, I'm honored to be asked to do this, especially to do the keynote. And not too long ago, I did an event for the State Department for OSAC. I presented on kind of the evolution and the history of how we got here in the industry as it pertains to protection and physical security, and some of the changes that we've seen from a timeline perspective in modern history. And looking back, I'm still putting my final touches onto my talk, but looking back in modern history and talking about all the events and different circumstances which cause different shifts and changes in our collective business and industry.
Right.
And so that's what I intend to do. And hopefully it will be well received. And I think it's important. I think it was Churchill that said, the further back you look, the further ahead you can see.
Sure.
And I think at times in our business, it's important to understand these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I think as we look at all we've been struggling with the pandemic over the past 18 months or so, that this is one of these kinds of changing events or change agents that will be forever with us in many ways.
Yeah.
And it gives us an opportunity to kind of reflect and to look on over the horizon as to what's next.
Yeah, and that's why these conferences are so important, right? And learning technology and the latest gadgets or the latest sites or the way to do things, that's really important, right? But I feel like, especially this year, methodology has really, really been the key forefront of what they've been pushing, right? Learning how to do things properly. I mean, I can only imagine you had to have good methodology if you're working off the typewriters and index cards. There's no magic button that's going to get you what you need, right? You actually got to do the gig. So it's pretty amazing.
Well, I don't know how effective we were. It certainly wasn't efficient. Matt, I was talking to an old FBI agent who has subsequently passed away, who was instrumental in helping me with one of my books involving the murder of an Israeli intelligence officer in 1973. Mm-hmm. And he told me that he had never worked a murder before, and he responds to the scene, and he said, all I could do was hearken back to my days at Quantico at the FBI Academy and try to remember what they taught me.
Right.
So to buy some time, I just pulled out a Polaroid camera and a tape measure, and I just started taking pictures and started measuring random things till I kind of collected my thoughts. And, in many ways, that was kind of my life story in the 80s when I went out to look at some of these investigations. And not much changed from that time period in 1973 into the 80s. We were still using the same kinds of tools and technologies, and information wasn't flowing like it is today on in the real-time social media world that we're all living with today.
It's crazy. Yeah, we were just talking before we started. So the day we're recording this is the day after Irma went through New York, right? And we were talking about, just looking online and seeing the damage, folks just getting the word out that, hey, the subways are underwater and things like that. It's crazy impressive of how quickly you can get this. And these companies, out there that provide this information. I think the biggest one out there is Data Miner. They supply that real time information to the news sources, but there are plenty of other good companies out there. LifeRaft is another one. Their Navigator and EchoSec, I think, is another one that does this stuff. Like that kind of technology is pretty amazing, where you've got these real time notifications that things are going on or going down. It's from an intelligence point of view, that's pretty amazing that, as far as reaction and getting everybody mobilized, right?
Oh, without a doubt. When you start looking at just the life safety capability of some of these alerting services, I mean, heck, we used to travel with little Sony radios so we could pick up the BBC because they were always the ones that were reporting breaking news faster than anybody, even the government.
Yeah.
And because the system, especially from a bureaucratic perspective, really wasn't set up for rapid alerts in any capacity. So, right. These kinds of technological developments in my lifetime have really been amazing when I look back at, the ability to have everything that you possibly want in one iPhone today is something that I really couldn't have imagined as a kid growing up in the 50s and the 60s, and certainly, working as an investigator in the 80s.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of things on there that we don't want either, right? Like, I don't like having a conversation with my wife about a couch. Then all of a sudden I'm getting all these ads on these brand new couches that are available. So no matter how many times you turn the listening off, the listing is always there, right? The Internet of Things is killing us. So.
Yeah, one has to ask, and it's really a very interesting aspect from an analytical perspective is, how much more information do you really need to make a decision at times?
Sure.
And it's kind of a fascinating kind of topic to even game board, or heck, you could do a PhD thesis on just that alone.
Sure.
Before it's just overwhelming to the point that you really can't make a decision because it becomes almost like this weight that's upon you because you're always waiting for additional information to help you make sense of a problem.
Too much data. You're on overload.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
I can see that being a problem. So what do you hope that the folks that are attending the conference, what do you hope they walk away with after your talk?
Well, I'm very hopeful that folks will understand how we got here. Also look out on the horizon on some of the research data that our Center for Protective Intelligence has put together on current threat landscape, some of the trends that we're seeing, some of the perceptions in the workplace as people continue to kind of drift back and forth into offices, though it's been somewhat of a yo-yo, as we all know, over the past 6 months.
Right.
And take away some topics that are thought-provoking and interesting, and hopefully engage individuals with conversations to help them make sense of all the challenges that we face in this profession today.
Yeah. And it's definitely not getting easier. There are a bunch of smart bad people out there, smart bad actors, right? And we almost have to really elevate and bring our A game to it. So Fred, this was awesome. This is really great. It's just a sneak peek. I feel like we could probably keep going, but I don't want to do it, man. I want people to come out and see you at this. I want them to attend virtually if they can't make it in person. It's October 10th through the 12th in San Diego, a great location. Just getting out and being able to network. That's the other benefit of this event is, you're meeting the best of the business here. So we're going to close with one like silly question, right? If you were not doing what you're doing right now, if there was another Fred Burton that was out there walking around, what do you think he'd be doing right now?
Matt, that's a great question. I know exactly what I'm going to be doing, and that my next career aspiration is to be a park ranger.
Fantastic. You're not the first guy to say outdoors. There were a couple people last year that one guy he just wanted to go fishing. He wanted to like leave his phone like on the dock and just go fishing.
That's a good one too.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So Fred, thank you so much for jumping on and giving us a sneak peek. I really look forward to meeting you in person. Wow, even the conversations we had before we started recording, I'm really looking forward to your chat, man. You really have a wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll have a regular episode on Monday, and we'll definitely follow up with another Quick Hits the following Thursday. So everyone stay safe out there, and we'll catch you on the next show real soon.
Thanks to Fred for being so candid about his experience. Great chat. Still thinking about osmosis? Now's the time to enroll if you haven't already. You can learn more about the event at OSMOSISCon.com. We also want to thank Scope Now and Investigator's Toolbox for sponsoring the episode. And have you checked out investigatorstoolbox.com yet? Make sure you look into this dynamic resource community for the investigative professional. Use code PIP201836 to save $20 when you join. And you can join through the app available on iOS and Android platforms. And if you have a question or a comment about the show, just email Matt at matthews@satellitepi.com. He always responds. And you can also find him on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. That's how I found him, or he found me. We'd like your feedback to bring you the best shows possible. And we'll be back on Monday with a new show. So make sure you tune in and stay safe out there.